Alrighty, welcome in everyone to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Friday, June 21st, and we have a great show for you today. We're going to start talking a little bit about the ACC. There's been some rumors around that some not good things are going to happen to the ACC here pretty shortly, so I wanted to break down some of the different updates and then some of the repercussions that could be happening from here until, when this all starts to really go down. Then we'll get into the Elite 11. It officially came to an end in LA this past weekend. Keelon Russell took home the MVP, but tons of guys had really, really good performances, so I want to break down all of that for you all. Then we'll get into a recruiting update. USC has had a tough week, I'll be totally honest with you, and it might just end up benefiting the Georgia Bulldogs at the end of the day, but we'll get into all those details towards the end of the show. Then we'll get into stock up, stock down. That is something we've been doing throughout the week. We'll finish it off with the ACC today. We have a couple of teams I feel really good about, a couple of teams I don't feel really good about going into the next couple of years. And then we're going to get into Tommy's guys for 2024. We're going to do part 2 today. We did part 1 on Monday. Just kind of guys that I really like going into the season. I think are going to have really, really fun seasons, really good seasons, and guys that you can obviously come back and make fun of me if they don't have really good seasons. So always fun for both of us. But before we jump in, I do want to remind you all we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show, and the best way for you all to get your question on the screen, we can have a fun back and forth here, is to use the tip and donation link at the bottom of the screen, gsmcpodcast.net. It's a huge help not only to us here at the network, but to you all. You get to kind of have a fun, interactive experience here, and I think that's always good for the both of us. Again, that's gsmcpodcast.net. But let's jump right in, and let's talk about the ACC, because for the last 2-ish months, maybe a month and a half, it feels like a lot of the news around the ACC and conference realignment, Florida State, Clemson, maybe even North Carolina, a lot of the things that we had been talking about for, the vast majority of the spring has kind of gone a little quiet. Florida State has had a couple of different hearings here and there, and they actually had one yesterday, so that kind of kick-started things just a little bit more, and essentially this was a follow-up from a previous argument that Florida State made, where they made an argument that the judge did not feel was worthy of, hearing a case out about it. They felt like that argument was a little bit weak, was not necessarily a very strong one, so they said, we'll give you a month to figure out a new argument, come back forward, and we can have a conversation about what that looks like and, go forward from there. Florida State came back, and the argument is actually a lot stronger than it was before, at least according to the judge. Judge John Cooper is the one overseeing this case, and he said essentially they made the strongest argument they've made to date, which is essentially boils down to the ACC is essentially running a corporation in Florida, which is Florida State and Miami. So it's not necessarily they are entirely tied to one another. It's just that the ACC kind of runs a corporate entity, I suppose, is kind of the best way to describe it, when they have the Florida State Athletic Department down in Tallahassee. And that argument kind of holds water with Florida State's argument that they didn't sign the ACC agreement. They didn't agree to the grant of rights that are in place. The ACC did. And that's something, not the grant of rights, but the media deal is more what I was zeroing in on there. The ACC signed that, not Florida State. So Florida State being a part of that is not necessarily the case as much, because the ACC is its own entity, and by Florida State's argument, and John Cooper believes it's a good one, they're their own entity. It's just they are under the umbrella of the ACC, but the decisions of the ACC don't necessarily impact or apply to the decisions of Florida State, is essentially the argument that they put out there. And it's a pretty good one, I'll be totally honest with you. It's definitely the one that, at least from my point of view, holds the most water in these arguments, at least over the past couple of months. And another thing that kind of happened, I haven't heard too much from Clemson's case. I think that one's kind of just waiting on the Florida State one to finish out, to be totally honest with you. I think everyone understood that when Florida State got in first, everyone was going to let them lead. They were going to let them go through the court case, maybe piss off the ACC just a little bit, do some things that other schools just didn't want to have to really get into the mud with. But once Florida State gets into the mud, then it's a lot easier to kind of get through it a little bit easier. So haven't heard too much on the Clemson case. I think we will very shortly after the Florida State one maybe wraps up or gets to a place where we feel like a settlement or Florida State's winning is coming at some point. So it'll be really interesting to watch that. But the other thing that a lot of people are pointing to, and a ton of people across sports media have talked about over the last little bit, is Josh Pate, a very, very connected person in the industry, posted a tweet about 2 days ago, maybe 3 days ago at this point, where he tweeted a video from Jurassic Park, and it was water rippling. And if you've seen the movie, you know that essentially just means there is a big dinosaur coming to tear you to pieces, and that's just kind of the moniker there whenever that is posted. And he said the ACC on top of it, so that created worry, and people were confused what that meant, because it could mean good things for the ACC, it could mean bad things. It meant bad things. Someone asked, actually, does this mean they're adding teams? He said they are doing the opposite of that in the reply. So something is happening. And frankly, for him to post that, for him to, give something that cryptic in that type of manner to put it out into the world, it doesn't have to do with Florida State and Clemson. I feel fairly confident in that. I think if it had to do with Florida State and Clemson, he would just tweet the Florida State and Clemson stuff. He would not be, talking in cryptic text or using GIFs from Jurassic Park. He wouldn't be beating around the bush. I can almost promise you that. It's someone that is not involved yet, and it's someone that we don't know exactly who it is, but I have a very good inclination that it's UNC. And we've talked about this a number of times on here, but just to refresh your guys' memory a little bit, UNC is the big domino. UNC is the one where if they join, it might just be curtains for the ACC. And I wish that wasn't the case, but that's the reality they live in. The UNC and Duke rivalry is the ACC in a lot of ways. When you think about the ACC, or at least me personally, I'm college football through and through. When I think about the ACC, I think about those games in Cameron Indoor and in Dean Smith Arena. I think about those games. So that kind of gives you an idea of how important those two entities are to the ACC. And I think you lose UNC, you're losing Duke. You lose Duke, you're probably losing NC State. And if you lose NC State, everyone's going. I'll just be totally honest. North Carolina is the place, especially because the ACC headquarters are there. You're not going to be able to battle these guys on anything but their home turf. You're not going to beat them out on home turf, where that was a big battle for Florida State and Clemson because they wanted those fought in North Carolina because that would help the ACC. It wouldn't against North Carolina or Duke or NC State. It just wouldn't. So it's going to be fascinating to watch this unfold, but one of the big things here is there's about a million different things kind of piercing the ACC in different directions. It's kind of like they're surrounded by a bunch of people with arrows, and slowly but surely they're shooting those arrows into the torso of the ACC. The problem is ESPN's just standing over top with a rocket launcher. They could blow this entire thing up with not a moment's notice, to be totally honest with you, because the second that the ACC drops below 15 teams, the ESPN has every ability to walk into that room, say, our contract is void, see you later, and that's about it. I'll be totally honest with you, that is as cut and dry as it comes in this industry, where you got to give us enough product. You got to give us enough things to sell, enough teams to sell, and if you can't do that, we have the right to, walk out of this agreement, or at the very least drop it significantly. And if they do that, the ACC is cooked. I'll just be totally honest with you. The ACC would be absolutely buried there, because I think, as we all know, every TV organization in this country, whether it's ESPN, Fox, CBS, whoever is broadcasting college football, in large part is running college football. So what ESPN does is going to have a huge effect on this, and they got to hope they can hold on to everyone but Clemson and Florida State, because I've said time and again, Clemson and Florida State are gone. They're going to find a way out. They've been fighting this for as long and had as many arguments as you possibly can to find a way out. So they're going to find a way out. I don't know where they land, to be totally honest with you, which is a conversation that is going to be fascinating to watch unfold, because the SEC said they're not interested in either of them, although I think they might flip that for Clemson at some point. I'm not exactly sure about that, but I feel like that might happen if Clemson actually is on the market. Utah might be a team that moves over to the ACC. Maybe you add a Sun Belt team as well to kind of help out that. Maybe you add Oregon State and Washington State out west. Who knows? But the ACC has an ability to stay alive technically if it's those two teams. If it is North Carolina and Duke, call it. It's over. And I wish that wasn't the case, but those are the two that if you lose them, you essentially don't have a conference anymore. And it's not because you don't have some great entities in there like Miami, like Virginia Tech, like even Georgia Tech in some circles. It means everyone else is looking for a new home almost immediately. So the Pac-12 could kind of gobble up some teams and hopefully come back to being the Pac-12 that we all remember. That would be really cool. SMU, Stanford, and Cal, I think, would go right on over. I think Virginia Tech, maybe even Georgia Tech would be interesting to watch, although I think Georgia Tech is a more interesting one than people are giving it credit for. I think they would get a look from one of the two big conferences and maybe just end up at one of those places if all of this were to go down. And then you have Florida State, Clemson, UNC, Duke. I likely think they're going to end up in one of the big two. I don't know which one those are going to be. I think UNC and Duke might be a little bit more Big Ten, but also kind of fit into the SEC. Both of them are going to really want these two entities, but Florida State and Clemson, I think Florida State fits a little bit more in the Big Ten, while Clemson a little bit more in the SEC, but at the end of the day, it's going to be really, really interesting to see how all of this unfolds. I think there could be some teams left behind, like Oregon State and Washington State. I think Boston College, Wake Forest could be in some tough waters in the next couple of years, but it'll be really interesting to see. The Big 12 could snag some teams and kind of raise their seat at the table just a little bit. So the goal in the ACC offices right now is stop the bleeding. As much as you can, stop the bleeding and make sure that everyone is here. As many people as possible are in the ACC going forward. If it's Clemson and Florida State, you can live with that. It's not ideal by any means, I promise you that, but you can live with that. You can make it through that kind of hurdle. If it's UNC and if it's Duke and if it's North Carolina State and Miami, you're screwed. That's just about it, and it could be that those things are coming fairly quickly. So the ACC for a long time has been under attack in two different directions, from Clemson and from Florida State. If more of those teams start to join and it becomes 5 or 6 different directions, it's just going to be impossible for the ACC to keep up. It's going to be impossible for them to stay upright. So I hate to see it go. I'll be totally honest with you, but it could be that we're coming to the end of the ACC, and it would be a very, very sad end, that's for sure. Kind of like the Pac-12 one a year ago, where feels like everything's fine and dandy, and then in about 6 months, you don't have a conference anymore. So it'll be really interesting to watch all of that unfold. Hopefully it's not quite as bad as I'm making it out to be a little bit, but we'll see what happens there. But let's take our first break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the Elite 11 camp that went on in LA a week ago. This week, tons of really, really talented kids out there, really great performances, but Keelon Russell was the one that stole the show. So we'll break it down, all of it, after this, so stick with us.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the ACC and how they could be heading for a rough couple of months with a lot of people letting them know they might just be finding a new place to play football. So it'll be really interesting to watch all of that unfold. But now I want to get into the Elite 11 finals because there was a ton that happened out in LA this week and a ton of guys that raised their stock, a couple of guys that kind of just had up and down weeks, but a couple of guys that just stole the absolute show. We didn't have Bryce Underwood in attendance, the number one quarterback in the country, which was obviously a big disappointment, but still just remarkably talented kids out there. And I want to start with the guy that absolutely stole the show, and that's Keelon Russell. This guy was just incredible all throughout the week, got rave reviews from literally everyone that was there. I believe it was Brooks Austin that works mainly around UGA football, went and said this kid's video or film lies because apparently on his film he doesn't look like the most natural, most gifted passer in the world, but then you see him out there on the field and the ball just explodes out of his hands. And frankly, that's not even the part of his game that scares me the most when he gets to the next level. I think he has the ability to be just an elite runner of the football. So I think when you see him out in open fields making all the throws, it's just got to make you that much more confident. So he took home MVP honors this time around, and that's just incredible for him. He was the first Bama quarterback, actually the second, but first Bama quarterback that actually played for Bama to win MVP since Tua Tagovailoa. There was last year, Julian Sayin did win it, but as far as I'm concerned, he's an Ohio State Buckeye, so I'm not necessarily going to count that towards Bama. But I think I was wrong about the Julian Lewis pick. I'll get to him here in a minute, but absolutely love Keelon Russell. I think he's going to be just really, really talented at the next level. And everyone that was kind of making fun of Bama for getting a SMU, you might just be eating your words, I promise you, because this guy is just absolutely incredible, and he might have just gotten his 5th star this week, so absolutely a huge week for him. The next guy I want to talk about is Hussein Longstreet. He absolutely showed up and showed out. Everyone that I saw talk about this kid was like, this kid is a different type of beast. I talked about him when we were previewing it as kind of the physical specimen of the group, and it showed. The dude can actually launch the ball downfield, has tons of arm talent, tons of arm strength, and I think he's one of those guys that might have been kind of lost in kind of the shuffle of some of the second-tier quarterbacks in this class. He made it known that he is right up there near the top and really, really showed out. And I think A&M fans have to be very, very excited to get this kid on campus. But let's get over to the southpaw of the group. Deuce Knight had a absolutely fantastic week. Won On3's MVP actually for the camp, so was not far behind some of the top players here. He can sling the ball. The dude can unload the ball way downfield, has that Michael Penix type arm strength from the left side from a lefty. So just dude can absolutely sling the ball all over the field. I think Notre Dame's going to be holding on to him for dear life. I think Ole Miss is pushing very, very aggressively. He seems relatively locked in on Notre Dame, but Lane Kiffin can pull off some things. So I think there's definitely going to be a lot of calls towards Deuce Knight over the next couple of days. And if Ole Miss can possibly flip this guy, then it's going to be a huge one. If Notre Dame can hold on to him, it might be the most talented quarterback we've seen at Notre Dame in quite some time, I'll be totally honest with you. So that'll be fascinating to watch. Tavian St. Clair came in as the top-rated quarterback in LA this week, and he was just about that. He was very, very consistent throughout the week. Didn't have one day where he didn't perform very well. He was towards the top in pretty much every single competition they did, and that's exactly what you would expect from the top-rated guy there. He honestly made the case that he should be the top quarterback in the country. You know, Bryce Underwood not being here left open an opportunity for someone to take that, and I think if anyone did, Tavian St. Clair would definitely be the guy because he just really had a great performance, and obviously when you only have to jump from 2 to 1, it helps a little bit, but it'll be interesting to watch him develop. Absolutely love the pickup for Ohio State, and I think a lot of people came out of this thinking this guy is going to be an elite player almost right away in college. And then you have the group. You have Julian Lewis is one I want to talk about, along with Matt Zollers here. Julian Lewis was interesting because he has a ton of ability. He is kind of that point guard of the offense where he's going to get the ball where it needs to be on time, that type of thing. he doesn't necessarily have the prerequisite arm strength of some of the other guys that I just talked about. He doesn't necessarily wow you when the ball jumps out of his hands. That doesn't mean he's not capable of making a ton of passes and not capable of being very, very successful. It's just when the ball comes out of some guy's hands, you're, wowed. When it comes out of Julian Lewis's hands, it's not necessarily the craziest thing in the world, but it gets to the wide receiver it needs to get to. He's very accurate. He's very smart. So I'm not necessarily worried by his performance by any means, but that was the biggest thing that stood out to me was the ball just doesn't launch out of his hands the same way it does some other guys in this group. So it'll be interesting to watch. Matt Zollers was a little bit inaccurate at times, but showed off the cannon that he has on his right torso. But I think it's going to be really interesting to watch what Julian Lewis and Matt Zollers do because I really like these two kids. I think they're two very different products at quarterback, but both very talented and definitely can be big-time success stories in college football. Luke Nichols, also a 3-star that made a ton of waves this upcoming year, so Miami's getting a really, really good one in Luke Nichols, so very excited for that. Ryan Montgomery is a very interesting one to watch because the dude's arm talent is just effortless. This is one of those where, I don't know if you guys remember those videos of Quinn Ewers throwing when he was coming through the ranks, and it's not the same throwing motion by any means, but the ball just kind of comes out of his hands like it's almost just too perfectly. Everything feels like it's absolutely the way he wants it to be. The spiral is just beautiful, and it explodes. So he's one of those guys that when you're looking at the UGA quarterback room, and let's just say it's Carson Beck this year, it's Gunnar Stockton for a year, but there's a reality over the next 5 years or so. They go from Carson Beck to Ryan Puglisi to Ryan Montgomery, and that would be a run of some of the best pure passers you have ever seen come through Athens. These guys would just be insane. Ryan Puglisi is the one that I am circling in red pen because I just cannot wait to see that kid get starting reps. But I think Ryan Montgomery is just going to be just as good, if not better, to be totally honest with you. And then you get to the guys that kind of had up and down weeks, but really did show some really good things. KJ Lacey is the one I want to start with. I think he did what he was meant to do, right? No one was expecting him to come wow them with measurables or his arm strength or anything like that, but the footwork is absolutely incredible. In fact, everyone that reported on him said that's probably the best footwork we saw all year or all camp, and that's a huge, huge thing when you're coming into college. Kind of that Bryce Young type guy. That's what Steve Sarkisian called him before, or right after he committed, actually called him Bryce Young 2.0, and he fits that type of mold. Is not necessarily going to be the craziest arm talent or do the craziest things on the football field, but he's going to make every single throw, and he's going to be athletic enough to make some plays with his legs, but his real asset is his accuracy and his ability to just dissect defenses better than really anyone in this class. So really, really remarkable player. Definitely someone that really showed what his assets are and showed that he can do them pretty much as well as anyone in the country. And then you had Trammell Jones Jr., definitely a very, very talented guy. A guy that really turned some heads, was a very technical passer, does not have a lot of wasted motion. The ball just kind of jumps out of his hands, is very, very comfortable throwing the football, so that was a good sign. Akili Smith Jr. is another guy, the Oregon commit, kind of had an up and down week. Was really good in some aspects, but a lot of his ability is with the athleticism, with moving pockets and kind of getting out on the run and making some plays for himself. So I don't necessarily worry about that too much, but definitely not the week that I think he was expecting or some Oregon fans might have been expecting from him. But Bryce Baker is the other guy I want to talk about because him and Jaron Kiawe, I'm going to do my best to do this, Jaron Kiawe Sagapulotele, I promise you I'm doing my best there. They both really turned heads this week. I think Jaron is one guy that can just launch the ball. He's another southpaw in this group with Deuce Knight, and the dude can absolutely do incredible things. Is uncommitted at this very moment, so people are calling him right about now. I can almost promise you that. I'm not exactly sure who's leading there, but plenty of talent with that kid, so not worried about that. Bryce Baker is someone that I really feel good about. I think he had up and down at times, but there's tons of ability there. He might just have to walk in and start right away at UNC. Maybe he'll sit a year behind Jacoby Criswell, but we'll see what happens there. And then one guy that I wanted to... Kevin Speary is another one, another 3-star, kind of an up and down week, finished kind of in the middle of the pack, but showed some really, really good things throughout the week. Then you have Malik Washington. This guy really turned heads. I think he might have been the guy that everyone was the most surprised about this week. And I think he's uncommitted right now. There's a ton of things to like about this kid. It sounds like Maryland is looking to lock him up right now, and Mike Locksley is very much definitely maybe even on his way to his house right now to do an in-home visit, make this stuff happen. But honestly, if they can lock this kid down, I might just have to change my stock down take about Maryland a couple of days ago, because this kid I think is special, and I think him and Mike Locksley could do some really, really special things at Maryland. But finally, I do want to give a shout out to Robert McDaniel. He stepped in when George McIntyre went down. Did not know that he was going to be in, so forgot to preview him on Tuesday. But when George McIntyre went down, he jumped right in and lit people up. He was really, really incredible and was on most top 10 lists that I saw at the end of the week. So much respect to him. You know, it's not an easy thing to come into a room with all of these incredible names that I just talked about and still hold your own. So very, very impressive from him. Arizona's got to feel really good about their commit there. So absolutely love this camp. I think it's always a really, really incredible thing that we get to kind of experience every summer. And I think it gives us an idea of how all these guys stack up. You know, it doesn't give us everything, obviously. You never really know what a guy's like until there's a 330-pound defensive lineman bearing down on him. But at the end of the day, it gives us a really good peek into who these kids are, how they operate. And then over the next couple of days, we'll get more and more details about some interviews that come out and some different things, which is honestly just as fun to hear about, because you get an idea of who the, you know, big time adults in the room, I suppose, are, who are the kids that need a little maturing to do, but there are definitely some kids that stand out. This is where Ryan Puglisi really got on my page a year ago, because everyone said this guy is basically an NFL quarterback from the neck up. So very much like this kind of world, very much like this weekend, and hopefully next year I'll be out there in LA covering this, because it's one of my favorite things that they do in college football, and definitely would be something that I'd love to cover in the future. But that's future Tommy problems, but we'll get to that. We're going to take our second break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk about a recruiting update. There are tons of things going on. USC took a little bit of a hit this weekend, and it might just be UGA's gain. So we'll break that down right after this, so stick with us.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. We just talked about the Elite 11 finals, broke down Keelon Russell, who took home the MVP honors. Tons of other guys that made a ton of noise. Tavian St. Clair had a great week, might just be the #1 quarterback when the next rankings come out. We also had Deuce Knight absolutely light people up, so tons to take away from that week, tons to like about the quarterback that might be coming into your program. But let's get into a recruiting update. And USC took a hit this weekend. They definitely did not have the weekend that they wanted, or the week that they wanted to have, and it's going to probably lean in the way of Georgia. Georgia is picking up more and more steam as the favorite to end with the #1 overall class, even with everything that Ohio State is doing over there in Columbus. The Bulldogs are going to be hard to beat. So let's break this down real quick, and it really starts with this guy right here. Isaiah Gibson is a remarkably talented edge rusher, the #1 edge rusher in the entire country, in fact, and he just decommitted from USC. Definitely a huge loss for the Trojans. A 5-star out of Warner Robins, Georgia, heavily leaning towards the Bulldogs. Frankly, he is in Columbus right now visiting Ohio State, so maybe they are able to pull that one off and add even more to that defensive class that they have brewing up there. But I feel pretty good that this guy's going to be a Bulldog. I think Kirby Smart has everything in his wheelhouse to make sure that this kid is a Bulldog at the end of the day. So I feel fairly confident about this one. I think he'll definitely be a Bulldog by signing day. I don't exactly know when all this is going to go down, but I think he's going to go to UGA at the end of the day. And then you had Justice Terry, another really talented player, number 2 defensive lineman in the country, out of Manchester, Georgia, are also decommitted from USC. Definitely not what USC wanted, definitely not what they expected to happen. But as I talked about a couple of days ago when I was talking about USC, it's just about keep swinging. You just have to keep swinging at these big-time guys. Some of them are going to sign with your team, and then you just keep rebuilding. It's not always going to be pretty, especially when you have 2 really talented defensive players in the state of Georgia. You're always going to have to battle Kirby Smart for those guys. So it'll be really, really interesting to see what happens there. Justice Terry, I think, likely will flip back to Georgia. He was committed to Georgia before, which is always kind of a hard thing to get a gauge on. Maybe he finds a new place to play. I know Alabama is also in on that conversation. So it'll be interesting to watch what happens, but a big blow to this USC class that was looking really, really good on the defensive side of the ball and is still looking really solid, but these 2 were the crown jewels of this class, that's for sure. But let's get on over to Alabama because they're doing just incredible things. They've added 6 players in 2 weeks since Keelon Russell flipped from SMU, and it started on the offensive line. Marcus Carroll, the number 2 interior offensive line in the country, and Jackson Lloyd, that guy right there, the number 6 offensive tackle in the country, are the 2 big-time pickups on the offensive line. They also got Mal Waldrop, who's a solid piece on the interior offensive line, a 3-star, so not necessarily towards the top of any recruiting list, but still a very talented young kid. Another big-time pickup was Chuck McDonald, a very, very talented kid at Mater D High School. This dude can play. Every kid at Mater D High School can play some football. I can almost promise you that. But this guy is the number 9 cornerback in the country and number 4 guy in this class for Bama. So a very, very talented pickup there. Landon Simmons is another D lineman they got. Might be a diamond in the rough, kind of on the Mal Waldrop type of tier, I suppose, of recruits. But when people at Bama find someone, you feel fairly confident that they found someone pretty good. I feel very confident in Kane Womack's ability to find talent when not a lot of people would. But let's get over to the other team that I think is going to light the world on fire over the next couple of weeks, and that's the Texas Longhorns. And it starts with that guy right there. Decorian Moore is absolutely huge for this class. He's the number 1 wide receiver in the country, and he was in Austin last week and had absolutely rave reviews when he was leaving. Took a photo shoot with pretty much his entire family, which is always a really, really cool thing to see. Now he heads to Eugene. He's probably heading to Eugene right about now, or just showed up, to be totally honest, and then is expected to commit sometime maybe late June, early July. I think Texas wins out on this one right now, but the Ducks will have their shot this weekend. If they can make some noise this weekend, then maybe they get a flip, or maybe they, turn the tides a little bit. But I think Texas is likely going to win out for Decorian Moore. And then you had another guy, Kalik Lockett, a very, very talented wide receiver. He was in Tuscaloosa this last weekend and left with a very good impression of what they're doing over there. I know Jamarcus Shepard is going to be a really, really hard guy to beat on the recruiting trail going forward, but Texas is still likely in the lead for this kid. All of that stuff can very much flip, and haven't necessarily heard too many concrete things from him since the Tuscaloosa trip, so you don't really know if anything is really flipped overnight, but as of right now, it feels like Texas is in a really good spot for him as well. On the offensive line, they have Michael Fasusi, I think a very, very talented kid. I think someone that went to A&M about a week ago, and there were some Longhorns fans that were just a little bit nervous because A&M did a remarkable job during that visit, but was in Austin this past weekend and did just an incredible job. It feels like the Longhorns have an edge right now to get him. If they do get him, it'll be the best offensive tackle Sark has brought in at Texas. So with Kelvin Banks in that repertoire, that's pretty impressive and shows you just how talented this kid is. And then you had Michael Terry, a very, very talented athlete, the number one athlete in the country. I'm not exactly sure what the position will be for him at the next level. I lean that he'll play in the back end of the defense, but it'll be interesting to see how the team handles that. But Texas got the lead right now. Still has a visit to Oregon, but it seems like the Longhorns are leading right now, and unless Oregon makes a really big impression, I think Texas will likely walk out with all four of those guys, and if that's the case, Texas is cooking. They're going to be right up there, right towards the top with Ohio State, with LSU, with Georgia, and it's going to be pretty incredible how quickly they jump. So over the next 3 weeks to a month, just keep an eye out on Austin and make sure, because it's going to get really interesting over there pretty quickly. But then let's get to a couple other commits that came through. Carius Kern is a very, very talented offensive lineman. In fact, the number one interior offensive lineman, according to On3, but the number 22 the number 22 interior offensive lineman, according to 24/7 Sports. So this will be a little bit of a recruiting site battle. We'll figure out who was right, who was wrong, and how talented this kid really is. I tend to believe that On3 is a little bit closer to right than 247, but who knows? It definitely adds to the LSU class that is number 2 in the country now, so just remarkably talented kid. Definitely will help with the Bryce Underwood of it all, that's for sure. And then another interior offensive lineman that came off the board is a very, very talented kid. Nick Moore has committed to Tennessee, the number 10 player in the state of Tennessee, number 25 interior offensive lineman in the country. A very talented kid, and in Tennessee, I think if you look at them right now, if they can build out that offensive line over the next couple of years, Josh Heupel and that offense are going to be explosive. That's the biggest variable in that offense. If you can protect the quarterback, they're going to be just more than fine, I'll be totally honest. And then you had that might be Jaden Wilkerson, I'll be totally honest. I might have messed up my slides here a little bit, but Jaden Wilkerson is a very talented offensive tackle that committed to Miami, 6'7", 330. Just, if you refine this kid and make him a little bit better of a pass blocker, he's going to be an absolute problem, and Mario Cristobal knows exactly how to do that. They also got Demetrius Campbell, another very physical guy at a 3-star, but very, very physical, 6'3", 300 pounds. They're doing what they need to do down in Miami. A huge wide receiver talent that I actually wanted to get to, which is this guy, Marcus Harris. Oklahoma was able to pick him up. Absolutely huge pickup for them. Oregon wanted this kid very badly. I can almost promise you that. Again, goes to Mater D High School with Chuck McDonald. This is a school where if you go there, I am very confident you're going to be a good player in college, because they play a different level of football over there, I'll be totally honest. So a huge pickup for Oklahoma. Definitely someone that will absolutely keep the really, really good wide receiver class going there. And then Penn State picked up a big-time commitment from Jameer Johnson, number 4, 22 cornerback in the entire country. One of the top players in their class, and it might be coming at a good time because Alvin Henderson, the top running back in their class and one of the top players in their class, just got a prediction from Steve Wiltfong to flip to Auburn. So definitely not all ideal for Penn State, but picking up Jameer Johnson definitely eases that pain just a little bit. Then you got a couple of D linemen that I want to talk about. Andrew Maddox is a 4-star defensive lineman. He is going to Ole Miss, a big-time pickup where Ole Miss just needs to keep loading up on the defensive side of the ball and keep recruiting at that level, and they might just be able to stick around for quite some time. So very much like this pickup. And then you had Malcolm Simpson. He was a 4-star D lineman that committed to the Huskers and going off to Lincoln. So big pickups for both of those squads. Definitely positions that they're going to need to fill this time next year. So we'll see what happens with those two guys. And then I want to get a couple of 2026 tidbits in there. I know this way in advance, but a couple of kids came off the board that I need to touch on. The number 2 quarterback in the country in 2026, Diabell, has committed to Texas. He is the son of NBA legend, in my opinion, NBA legend Raja Bell, a very, very talented player in his own right. But this kid is an elite thrower of the football. He can do literally anything you want him to do, is that kind of ultimate point guard of the offense, but is a dual threat, so has some of that ability with his legs, can do some different things. In fact, he's the first dual threat quarterback that Sark has signed since he's been at Texas, so it'll be interesting to see if anything changes with the offense once he gets his time, but that's quite a bit away. But quarterback position continues to not remotely be a problem for Texas in the recruiting world. And then you got Brady Hart, a 4-star, top 10 quarterback in the country, committed to Michigan this past week. A very, very talented kid. Definitely locking up your quarterback to start your class in 2026 is absolutely huge. So definitely getting that guy, letting him recruit all the other guys around him, always a win. And this guy is very, very talented. So Michigan's got to be very happy for that. Recruiting is going to be insane over the next couple of weeks. It's already been pretty wild, but I think it's going to get even more crazy. Some big time names coming off the board in the next 3 weeks to a month. So definitely be on the lookout. We will keep you updated with everything you need to know right on here. So no worries about that by any means. So we'll keep you updated on all of it as it comes out. But let's take our third break here. And when we come back, we're going to get into stock up, stock down. We've done this with the SEC, the Big 10, the Big 12, and now we're to the ACC. And I have two teams that I really like over the next 3 to 5 years and two teams I don't necessarily like over the next 3 to 5 years. And we'll break those guys down right after this. So stick with us.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about a little bit of a recruiting update. Tons going on in the recruiting world. USC had a tough week, and it might just be UGA getting a very nice week in a couple of weeks here. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens with all of that. But, let's jump into a stock up, stock down segment. We've been doing this the last couple of days. Got through the SEC, the Big 10, the Big 12. But now we are on to the ACC. If you want to check out those other ones, they are all up on the YouTube page as always. But let's get into the stock up teams. And there's one team that I am just pounding my chest about, and that is the SMU Mustangs. I think this team has an ability to make a ton of noise over the next little bit. I think, obviously, they have the remarkable story about 30 years ago where they were in a football program for 5 years, and now they're ready to get back into the party. They are in the ACC in a power conference for the first time in quite some time, and last year they made it show. They raised $169 million last year. For reference, it was something like $124 million for A&M. So that's the reality of SMU. Everyone was kind of really happy to have them down in the American, where maybe the donors weren't as inclined to put together that much money. Now they're back at the big boy table, and it gets really interesting from here on out, because I think they can play the NIL game with literally anyone in the country. That is not going to be an issue for this team. I promise you that. The recruiting base they have in Dallas is absolutely insane. I know that they're going to have to battle Texas, and they're going to have to battle A&M and Oklahoma and LSU and TCU at times, but this team is going to be able to pull off some things. I can almost promise you that. I think Rhett Lashley has an ability where he can open up an offense really, really well, and when you can do that, you're going to get some kids that you're not supposed to get, frankly. You're going to get some really talented wide receivers, some really talented running backs, maybe a really talented quarterback at some point. So SMU's in a position where they're going to play really good football this year. Preston Stone is going to be a guy that is not going to be wavered, is going to play really good football almost no matter what. I think Rhett Lashley is going to be able to put together a really good scheme that is going to be really hard to deal with for some ACC teams, and I think SMU might not, come in and just roll away with the ACC. They might not, roll in and just be the team that is the team to beat every single year. I feel very confident that they're going to be a player. I feel very confident that at some point they might just be sitting at the top of the mountaintop in the ACC. We just got to give it time, but it's starting pretty quickly, and I feel very confident in SMU going forward, and that guy has a lot to do with it, because I think what Rhett Lashley is able to do at SMU is going to be pretty special, I'll be totally honest. Another team that I've talked about a lot is Georgia Tech, and I think everyone kind of looks at Georgia Tech and they're sort of a butt of a joke, and I sort of understand it because of the Georgia rivalry has not necessarily been too competitive over the last decade or so, but the reality is this program is not as far away as people want to admit. I think there is a cohesiveness, there is an alignment in this program that has not been there in a very long time. Brent Key came in, and he is as confident and as clear of a vision as you see across the country. He knows exactly how he wants to go about things, and he's doing it really, really well thus far. Recruiting is always going to be a little bit of a battle. There's no two ways about that, because when you have that, type of academic standards at a school, sometimes kids aren't going to qualify, and Georgia Tech is a little bit less willing to bend the rules for some kids than some other universities are. So that's always going to be a little bit of a hurdle, but the recruiting base that they have is really incredible. You cannot leave the city of Atlanta and be able to get a really good Power 5 team. I can almost promise you that, because I grew up in Atlanta and I saw a lot of really talented players walk through my high school and beat us by about 50 points, but that's beside the point. There's going to be just a ton that Georgia Tech can do, not even leaving their own backyard, which is absolutely huge for them. Brent Key and the Jackets is one of those things where it's going to be brick by brick. It's not going to be huge jumps. It's not going to be huge fluctuations. It's not going to be anything that, lights the world on fire with 30 transfers. What they are going to do is slowly get better. They are going to slowly build on the little things that they need to do right, particularly the offensive line, which is Brent Key's bread and butter. He's going to be able to create a better offensive line pretty much every single year that he's there. So I worry very little about what Georgia Tech is going to be in the future. I think, obviously, with conference realignment and all of the questions around the ACC, there's going to be questions. But at the end of the day, he has a really good staff. He has a couple of guys that, frankly, I think will be future head coaches, like Buster Faulkner or Tyler Santucci on his staff. But also on top of that, everything just feels like he's in full control of his situation. He fully understands how he wants to evaluate, what he can evaluate, and the guys he's just not going to get in the recruiting world. He knows when to fight and when not to fight. He has this vision. He's executing it to perfection, and I think Georgia Tech's one of those teams that probably isn't going to dominate the ACC or do anything crazy, but they're going to be a team that you cannot walk over in the near future. I can almost promise you that. But now let's get to the stock down teams, and I am going to make a couple of enemies here. But UNC I just don't love. This one hurts me a ton, I'll be totally honest with you, and it's because of the guy that is the head man here. I love Mack Brown. He is one of my favorite people in college sports. He's one of my favorite people in college football, and he's been just incredible over the last 30 years. He's one of those guys that you hear about the stories about him off the field, and it's more incredible than what he did on the field, and he's a Hall of Fame coach on the field. So it's just incredible what he was able to do throughout his career, but I think his time at the top is done. I think this UNC team feels like a team that has kind of stood still the last couple of years, not necessarily gotten a ton better talent-wise or gotten a ton better on the coaching staff, while teams like North Carolina State and Virginia Tech and Louisville and Miami all did that. And I think they've kind of lost a little bit of pace in the ACC, and I do think that it's going to be one of those worlds where they're going to be able to compete. They're going to be able to win 7, 8, maybe even games in a year, but that's the reality. I don't think there's a path really, at least in the next couple of years. Obviously, a lot of things can change over the next little bit with maybe a conference change, maybe a coaching change when Mack Brown officially hangs him up, because they're not firing Mack Brown. I can almost promise you that, and they probably shouldn't, because he's a really good head coach, but at the end of the day, there comes a time when, you're just not going to be at the top of the game anymore. And I think that's probably what we've come to with Mack Brown. And I think UNC is going to be who they are for the next little bit. I think they're going to be an 8 or 7 win team. They're not going to beat the teams that are better than them on paper. They're probably going to beat the teams that they're better than on paper. So they're going to, do what they do. They're going to be very middle of the road. They're going to play some good games. They're going to play some bad games. But at the end of the day, I don't see this going in the right direction until some pretty big changes are made at UNC, if I'm being totally honest. As much as I hate to say that, because this guy is really one of my favorite people in college football, but I think if UNC is really going to compete in the ACC or whatever conference they go to next, I think it's likely with another head coach other than Mack Brown. But we'll see what happens there. It'll be really interesting. And then the other one, It's the Clemson Tigers. This one's a little bit easier, frankly, because they're right near the top. Actually, they are at the top because they are the betting favorites for this upcoming season. And frankly, over the last 5 years, it used to be just them at the top, right? Remember back in 2018, 2019, it was Clemson and then everyone else. And that was the way the ACC worked. And there was a while there where it felt like that was just going to be the way that it worked for quite some time, but Florida State and Miami started coming up, and they have been joined by them at the very top of this conference. And the biggest thing here is Dabo is not changing. The portal is not the way that he's going to go about things. If he was going to make that flip, he would have already. NIL is not going to be a big part of his conversation. If it was, he would have done it already. And I, frankly, very much respect him for standing on that principle, for doing the thing that he feels is right by these kids and not necessarily playing the game that everyone else is playing. But that doesn't change that I don't agree with it. And it doesn't change that I don't think it'll come back to bite him. So I think it's just one of those things where you have a coach that has done so many incredible things and is a Hall of Fame coach and, is the best coach in Clemson history and has done just incredible things down there. But if you're not willing to adapt to the times, they're going to get you at some point. I feel very confident in that. And also, the problem with this for Clemson is they might just be finding their way into a new conference at some point here pretty soon. And if they do that, and if it's the SEC and the Big Ten, and you're not using the portal, you're dead. I'll be totally honest with you. There's almost no chance that you can keep up with the talent level that everyone else has if you're not dipping your toe into the portal from time to time. And I just don't see Dabo doing that. I think if he was going to do it, he would have done it a bit ago. So it'll be really interesting. Clemson still has a really good energy. They still have a really strong culture. They're still remarkably talented. So they can still turn all this around and make me eat all of the words that I just said this upcoming year. But as of right now, I'm looking at the ACC, and I see a ton of teams that can beat Clemson, not just a handful that might be able to beat them like it was 5 years ago. So I don't think teams are all that scared to play Clemson anymore. I think they want to play Clemson in a way because they want to be the person that slays the dragon. They want to be the person that buries Clemson once and for all. So it's a different dynamic, and I think it's only really going to get worse over the next couple of years. And I think Clemson is going to be one of those teams where you look back in 5 to 10 years and you wonder if Dabo Swinney just dipped his toe into the transfer portal just a little bit. Is he right up there with Nick Saban? Is he right up there with what Kirby Smart could be in 10 to 15 years? Is he one of the all-time greats, or is he just a coach that popped up for a little bit? No, frankly, he's already one of the greatest coaches of all time, probably top 10. I don't want to necessarily disrespect him in that way, but just to say, is this going to be his legacy, or is the 2 national titles going to be his legacy, is the big question for me. I lean the national titles no matter what. The general public might not. So it'll be really interesting to see what the next couple of years hold for Clemson, for UNC, and hopefully they can right the ship. But as of right now, when I look at those programs, it doesn't feel like the program it was 3 or 4 years ago, and it feels like it's going in the wrong direction. So don't necessarily love those. I think it'll be really interesting to see how all of those programs progress over the next little bit, and especially if they're in new conferences, how that kind of affects things. But we'll take our final break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk about my guys for this upcoming season. We did this last week, and we had 5 guys that we broke down. We'll have 5 more for you today, and we'll keep kind of a running tally. This is something that I kind of wanted to do just to give you guys an idea of who I'm watching. So maybe if you turn on a Michigan State game or a North Carolina State game, you know that you at least one guy that you should be watching every single play. But also, it's a good way for you guys to come back at the end of the year and clown me because I was wrong about some of these guys, which is always a good thing for both of us. So it'll be really interesting to watch. This one is a little bit more based on the careers of the guys, but still think these guys are going to have fantastic 2024s. But for me, it starts with Aiden Childs. Aiden Childs might be my number 1 guy, if I'm being totally honest. I think this guy has the ability to do some things on the football field that not only very few people in the country can do, but very people alive can do. This guy has an athletic ability that are just off the charts. And I think one of the things for him is just get him reps. He came into different games at Oregon State throughout the year, almost every game really, but a lot of running packages, a lot of things that, just didn't really fully show what he's capable of doing, and especially didn't necessarily prepare him too much for a starting job. Now he's got that one, and he's going to Michigan State, and he's going to be under his old head coach, Jonathan Smith, and he'll get every single rep he wants. There is no chance that he is getting anything but first-team reps right now. There is very little chance that he gets benched at any point this season because, frankly, Michigan State's not going to be a very good team, and you'd rather have Aiden Childs be ready for 2025 than and struggle in 2024 and learn the ropes rather than pull him and then have to put him right back in 2025 and have the same struggles. So I think it'll be a really interesting season. His is going to be a little bit longer of a journey because the passing is just not necessarily where you want it to be. It's not necessarily bad by any means. He definitely has a ton of tools that can develop him into a very good passer, but as of right now, it's just not where you want it to be from a consistency basis, accuracy, all of those type of things. So it'll be fascinating to watch this kind of unfold. Brian Lindgren is the offensive coordinator over there. If he can put him in winning situations, this kid is going to excel because put him out in open field, put him out, rolling pockets, read options, whatever it looks like. Get him out in open space and just let him work because he can make a ton of things happen with his legs. And if you can pull a linebacker or a safety down when he leaves the pocket, you might just have someone over the top to make a big time play. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens. I think he is a guy that in his future can win the Big Ten, can go to the playoff, but it definitely won't be in 2024. I'll say that with my chest, but I really like this kid. I think he has the ability to do some really remarkable things at Michigan State and really develop into one of the best quarterbacks in the entire country. But let's move on to Justice Haynes. This is a guy that is a little bit less, unknown. None of these guys are really unknown if you're a big-time college football guy, but Justice Haynes, for the life of me, I cannot figure out why more people aren't talking about him. This kid is just remarkable. He does everything really, really well, and he's one of those guys that's just built like that classic running back where if you're head on with him one-on-one in space, you might as well just take the business decision and get on the ground because this guy's going to run through you. He is just really, really incredible. Still has that speed on the outside that you need to be a dangerous running back. So this guy is frankly just terrifying. He can do so many really incredible things. And I think one of the big things that we thought we saw with Alabama a year ago was this classic murder ball, as they call it in Tuscaloosa, where we're going to run the ball, and we're going to run the ball some more, and we're going to make you quit. I think they have the ability to actually do that this year. Last year, the offensive line wasn't quite where you wanted it to be, so they couldn't necessarily do that. This year they can. With Jamarian Miller, with Justice Haynes, with Richard Young, they can absolutely play that type of game, and it might just be the game that they play and then just go over the top a couple of times, but Kalen DeBoer is going to spread the ball out a little bit more. He is going to kind of spread the field, but that helps us as well. You open running lanes, you make the job easier for O-linemen because they don't have to block 6 guys on 5. They can only block 5 because everyone else has an assignment in a passing game. So it'll be fascinating to watch this unfold. Frankly, when I look at Justice Haynes, I think he has the ability to be the next great Bama back. I think he can be a Derrick Henry, Mark Ingram type player. I don't know if he'll win a Heisman because, as we all know, that's become kind of a quarterback award since Derrick Henry won it even. But at the end of the day, this kid has all the talent in the world, and I think they're just going to be handing him the ball just a ton this upcoming season. So very much like him, cannot wait to see him on the field. Another guy I'm watching very, very closely, and honestly, one of my very personal favorites is Noah Rogers. He transferred over from Ohio State to NC State this past year, and frankly, he would have started on 90% of the teams last year if he was not at Ohio State. He was just at the best wide receiver room in the entire country. So he kind of came over to Raleigh and just immediately lit the world on fire. This dude absolutely got everything. Everything was rave reviews. Everyone was all over this kid. They absolutely loved what he did in the spring ball. And I think it's not because the NC State back end is bad. In fact, I think it's going to be really good. He just has tons of ability. His route running is really, really incredible. And there's tons of reasons that I like this kid. But the number one is he's not even the best wide receiver on the roster. Kevin Concepcion is going to be the guy that defenses really zero in on. He's going to be the guy that they circle on Monday and say, that's the guy you have to stop. If you can stop him, then we have a shot. That means Noah Rogers can fill in the cracks. Also, I think Justin Jolie is going to take a ton of attention in the middle of the field, which is going to open even more doors for Noah Rogers. I've said a couple of times that I think this will be their leading receiver. I think Kevin Concepcion will be a fantastic player and do incredible things this upcoming year, but I think when they need a third down or when both those guys are covered and really just blanketed, Noah Rogers is going to be able to get open and make some really, really fantastic plays. So very much like this guy, a great route runner, really sure hands, and definitely someone that can totally change the complexion of this offense. So if Grayson McCall can get back to that 2021 Grayson McCall, then an ACC title is absolutely on the table for this team, and Noah Rogers would have plenty to do with that. But let's move right along here, and Sonny Styles is someone we talked about yesterday when talking about this Ohio State roster, and I made the comparison between Sonny Styles and DeMarvion Overshown, the old Texas linebacker / safety, which is the same situation that Sonny Styles finds himself in. He is making his way down into the box to play linebacker this upcoming season after playing safety for the first couple of years at Ohio State, and I think it's going to work out really, really well. I think this kid struggled a little bit, covering some of the slot receivers, and some of the coverage assignments that he had were just a little bit too tough for him. But when you move him down into the box, it makes him an absolute torpedo. The dude can absolutely fly downhill and make some really, really good plays in the run game, but also drop back into hook coverage and kind of play that middle of the field or follow a tight end downfield or possibly play off a running back coming out of the backfield. So he can do a ton of really, really good things, but I think the biggest asset for them is just let Cody Simon and CJ Hicks hold down the middle of the field, and then just use Sonny Styles as that rover. Just put him all over the field, put him pretty much somewhere different every single snap, and just let him go make plays, because that's going to be the best way for him to be effective for this team. And I think if Sonny Styles really hits the way that I expect him to, Ohio State's going to have the best defense in the country, and it could be by a pretty comfortable margin. So it'll be really interesting to watch this kid develop. He's one of those guys that I really love, and I'm watching incredibly closely going into this year. And then to finish it out here, Toriano Pride Jr., he is in a Clemson gear there. He is no longer at Clemson. He is at Missouri. I just could not find a Missouri clip for the life of me. So he is another portal pickup that I absolutely loved. I think is one of the more underrated ones of the entire cycle. He went to Missouri, and Pride left Clemson to replace two guys that were walking out the door at Missouri that are just huge. Enos Rakestraw and Chris Abrams-Drain were one of the best, maybe the best cornerback duo in the entire country a year ago. They were just absolutely incredible. Actually, there were a couple others that I don't want to disrespect in that way, but this one was very much near the top, and they're going to need guys to replace him, and Toriano Pride Jr. is absolutely going to be asked on to do that. He only played the first 4 games of the season last year at Clemson, but I think he did a really good job in those 4 games, has great ball skills, coverage ability, can do a lot of really, really good things on the back end, and definitely, I think just with more reps, will be able to become a really, really good player. So I think when you look at Missouri's defense, there are some worry spots. They brought in some guys on that back end that really do have to hit out of the portal if they're going to be successful. I think the defensive line is going to be solid, but I think someone like Williams-Nawari is going to have to step up as a freshman. But overall, I think there's a couple of guys on this defense that could totally unlock it. And I think Toriano Pride Jr. is one of them where if he gets a couple of picks, if he's a really sticky corner, if he's someone that you can trust on to just say, follow this guy the entire game, follow I was going to say Luther Burden, but he would only do that in practice. Follow Isaiah Bond, follow Deion Burks, whoever it is on the other side of the football, and be able to cover them really well. I think it's going to be a huge asset for Missouri and could put them in conversations for the SEC title and maybe even the playoffs. So it'll be fascinating to watch what happens with him over the next little bit, because I absolutely love this kid, and I think there's going to be a couple of headlines that have his name in bold when they talk about Missouri wins. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens there. But that'll do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference for us. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all of the social pages for all of the content and updates you could possibly need. We just have incredible people doing incredible work across every single sport you could think of. So if you need anything in the world of sports, come on over to GSMC and we have you totally covered. But thank you once again for listening, and I will see you guys tomorrow.